She fixed his luxury car for free, but the ring on her finger revealed a dark past. A stranger in worn-out jeans and oil-stained hands stopped to help a millionaire whose Maserati had just given up on him. She didn't want money. She didn't ask for thanks. But when she reached out to close the hood, he saw it, a delicate sapphire ring on her finger. And in that moment, his world stopped. That ring wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a memory, a promise, a lie buried under decades of silence. Welcome to Cracks of Light, where we uncover hidden truths, lost connections, and stories that remind us how even the smallest spark can change everything. Before we dive into this unbelievable journey of a forgotten promise and a secret that could destroy an empire, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep shining light into the darkest corners of life. It was supposed to be just another win for Julian Creed. A crisp morning, blue skies, $3,000 suit freshly pressed, and a presentation that could add another billion to his name. The Maserati, sleek and confident, had never failed him until today. About 20 minutes outside Aurora, on a stretch of road most GPS systems forgot, the engine coughed, then screamed, then died altogether. Julian slammed his palm against the steering wheel, cursed under his breath, and checked his watch. He had 16 minutes left to get to the Aurora Innovation Summit, where investors, reporters, and half the state's political circle were waiting to hear from him. He popped the hood more out of habit than knowledge. Smoke billowed out like a bad omen. He stepped back, loosened his tie, and realized with a sinking chest that he was completely, undeniably stuck. No cell service, no backup, no assistant. Just him, the heat, and the ticking clock. Then came the hum of an old pickup, faded red, dented fender, tires that squeaked with every turn. It pulled over without hesitation. A woman stepped out, black, maybe mid-30s, strong arms, grease on her jeans, hair tied back like someone who didn't have time for appearances. "Need help?" she asked. Her voice wasn't overly polite. It was plain, straight, the kind of voice used to being ignored until something broke. Julian hesitated. He wasn't used to being the one in need. "I've got a meeting," he muttered, "in 10 minutes. She walked over to the engine without waiting for an invite. Looked under the hood like it was a puzzle she'd solved 100 times. "Coolant system," she said flatly. "You overheated it." He blinked. "Can you fix it?" She shrugged. "Temporary fix. Get you into town. Won't hold for long." She walked back to her truck, pulled a faded green toolbox from the back, and got to work. Julian watched, slightly annoyed at how in control she was. She moved like she owned the space, like the Maserati wasn't intimidating at all. "You do this for a living?" he asked, more out of habit than interest. "I run a shop 10 miles from here," she answered, not looking up. "Johnson Auto." You passed it without noticing. Her hands were fast, exact, no wasted motion. As she worked, he noticed the ring on her finger. Small, silver, slightly worn, with a soft blue stone in the center. Not flashy, but meaningful. The moment he saw it, time did something strange. The heat disappeared. The road faded. There was, tucked behind a dusty memory, that ring. He'd seen it before. Or more than that. He had given it to someone. Years ago. A girl. Big eyes. A quiet voice. The orphanage tree. A promise. "You okay?" she asked. He blinked, stepping back. "That ring, where'd you get it?" She paused, then looked at him with a strange mix of surprise and caution. "It was my mother's," she said simply, turning her hand slightly so the sapphire caught the light. "What?" Julian opened his mouth. Closed it. There was no way. Couldn't be. That was 20 years ago. That little girl. He barely remembered her name. Ray? May? Something soft, something that clung to the back of his mind all these years like a song he couldn't place. She must have seen the confusion on his face because she stepped back. "I'm not taking your money," she said, almost offensive. "Just get the car looked at before you drive too far." First right after the Aurora City sign. She packed up, slid the toolbox back in her truck bed, and drove off before he could find the words to stop her. Julian stood there, sweating in his Italian leather shoes, watching the red pickup disappear down the road. The engine started. The car ran again, but nothing inside him felt right. He made it to the meeting, barely. Said the words. Showed the slides. Got the applause. But all he could think about was that ring. That face. That voice. He got back to his hotel and pulled out his laptop. Searched for Johnson Auto, Aurora. There it was. A small shop. 5-star reviews. Owner, Ray Johnson. He leaned back in his chair. Ray. It was her. Later that night, long after the summit crowd had cleared, Julian sat alone on the hotel balcony with a glass of whiskey in his hand. He typed her name in his search again, but deeper this time. Public records. Local newspaper clippings. There wasn't much, but one article caught his eye. Young mechanic opened shop in hometown after years in foster care. He stared at the screen. Her photo was small, grainy, but it was her. The girl with the wooden bird he never returned. The girl who'd taught him how to carve when the others mocked him. The girl who'd made him promise he'd come back. And he never did. He closed the laptop. In the silence of that high-rise room, with the city blinking outside, Julian Creed, tech billionaire, media darling, heir to the Creed empire, felt something crack quietly inside. Something old. Something honest. It wasn't guilt exactly. It was regret. Not because of the broken car, but because the girl who had once meant something to him had grown up and walked away from him like he was just another stranger. He told himself it was coincidence, that rings like that existed everywhere. But he knew better. The way she looked at him, the pause in her breath. She had recognized him too. She just chose not to say it. The next morning, Julian did something out of character. No driver, no assistant. He rented a nondescript sedan and drove to Johnson Auto. The shop was small, clean, with a wide garage door open to let in the morning air. He stepped in, heart in his throat, and saw her array, under a lifted car, wrench in hand, humming to herself. She didn't look up. We're open, she said. What do you need? Julian held out his hand. In his palm was a small carved wooden bird, the wings spread wide. Her humming stopped. The wrench slipped from her hand and clattered on the floor. She stared at the bird like it had come back from the dead. Slowly, she stood. Where did you get that? Her voice was no longer guarded. It trembled. Julian swallowed. From you. A long time ago. Under that tree at Open Heart Orphanage. She stepped forward, eyes wide. You were the boy who cried when the others laughed. You swore you'd come back. I tried, he said softly, but my father had other plans. Her eyes narrowed. Gregory Creed doesn't have plans. He has orders. In that moment, the silence between them said more than any apology could. The ring on her finger shimmered again. The past had found its way to the surface. And for the first time in years, Julian Creed didn't know how this story would end. The next morning, Julian couldn't focus. Not on emails. Not on numbers. Not on the congratulatory texts flooding his phone after the summit. The only thing he saw, again and again, was her face when she looked at that wooden bird. It was the kind of expression you don't fake. Shock, memory, maybe even pain, and it unsettled him more than he expected. He found himself back on the road to Aurora, this time without a reason he could explain. Maybe it was guilt, maybe curiosity, maybe it was something older than both. He didn't even tell his assistant where he was going. He just drove. Hope Garage was nothing fancy. A small building off the main road, with a hand-painted sign that had faded under sun and time. There was a single bay open, a truck up on the lift, and the faint sound of music playing inside. He parked off to the side and stepped in slowly. The first person he saw wasn't Ray. It was an older man, tall, a bit bent from years of labor, wiping grease off his hands with a rag that looked older than Julian's last 5 suits combined. The man looked up, measured him from head to toe, and said nothing for a long moment. Then, without a hint of welcome, he asked, "You lost?" Julian hesitated. "I'm looking for Ray Johnson." The man nodded once. "You found her yesterday," he said, then turned away. A minute later, Ray appeared from the back, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist. She looked the same jeans, same boots, same calm, but her eyes were wary now. Like she expected this visit, but wasn't thrilled about it. "You came back," she said flatly. "Yeah," Julian replied, rubbing the back of his neck. "I needed to." She folded her arms. "To say what?" "That the car is still running." He gave a dry laugh. "No, to say I remembered. You, the tree, the bird, the ring, everything. She said nothing, just walked past him toward a workbench and opened a small wooden box. Inside was something wrapped in a piece of cloth. She unwrapped it and held it out to him. It was the bird, not the one he'd returned. Another one, smaller, less polished. It was the first one he ever carved, the one he'd tossed in frustration when the other kids made fun of him. "You thought I didn't see where it landed," she said softly. "But I did. I kept it. For months. I figured if you ever came back, I'd give it to you and remind you who you used to be." Julian stared at the carving. It was crude, splintered at the edges, but the shape was clear. A bird in flight, wings open. He couldn't speak. Ray wasn't angry. Not exactly. But there was something in her eyes that pressed on his chest like a weight. "Why didn't you come back?" she asked. "You promised. You looked me in the eye and said you'd come back. That I wouldn't be alone forever." Julian swallowed. The truth was messier than he wanted to admit. "My father took me away 2 days after that," he said. "I didn't get to say goodbye. They told me we were just visiting the city for the weekend. Next thing I knew, I was enrolled in a prep school on the other side of the state." Ray didn't flinch. "You didn't try?" she asked, her voice low. "Not even a letter?" "I was 13, Julian said, but the excuse sounded hollow the second it left his mouth. "You remembered me," she said. "That ring, it mattered." Julian nodded. "It did. I just didn't know it still existed, or that you still wore it." She glanced down at her hand. "My mom gave it to me before she disappeared. It's the only thing I have left of her." That caught Julian off guard. Disappeared? Ray looked up, something hard flashing in her eyes. Yeah, one day, she just didn't come home. No police reports. No real answers. Just gone. And nobody cared, not in a town like this. Julian sat down on a stool nearby, tried to find something useful to say, but Ray kept talking. "You know what's funny? I kept reading about you." Julian Creed, youngest tech CEO, billion-dollar mergers, sustainable infrastructure projects, philanthropy. And all I could think was, this guy used to cry under a tree because the other boys were mean. This guy carved birds out of shame, not art. Julian felt something twist in his gut. She wasn't being cruel. She was being real. And it stung in a way boardrooms never could. "Ray, I didn't forget you," he said. "I forgot how to find you." She shook her head. "No, you forgot how to look." A long silence settled between them. Then Malcolm walked back in, threw a greasy rag on the table, and said, "You said your name's Creed?" Julian nodded slowly. "Julian Creed." Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "That got anything to do with Creed Development?" Julian stiffened. "Yeah, it's my father's company." "What?" Ray turned to him sharply. "Wait, the Creed that's building that luxury complex near the valley." Julian blinked. "You mean the Aurora expansion project?" Ray laughed bitterly. "Yeah, that's what they're calling it now. You know what that land used to be?" Julian shook his head. Ray walked over to the desk, pulled out a faded map, and pointed to a section marked in red. "That was my family's land. My mom's land. Before it was taken." Julian stood up. "Taken how?" Ray narrowed her eyes. "You tell me. Because every time someone in this town asks for the paperwork, they get nothing. No deed records. No transfers. Just erased." Julian ran a hand through his hair. This was bigger than he thought. Much bigger. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "I swear." Ray stared at him, like trying to read through his face to find the truth. "Maybe you didn't, but someone in your family did." Julian didn't know what to say. The more he stood there, the more he felt like the ground under him wasn't solid anymore. Ray had been a memory, a what-if, but now she was something else, someone holding a thread to a story he hadn't even realized he was part of. And that story wasn't finished. Not even close. Julia didn't sleep that night. Not really. He laid in the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, letting the hum of the minibar and the distant buzz of traffic fill the silence Ray had left behind. Her words echoed louder than any applause he'd gotten at the summit. "You didn't forget how to find me. You forgot how to look." He hadn't meant to be that person. But maybe, without realizing it, he'd become exactly the kind of man his father had raised him to be. Selective, efficient, blind when it was convenient. The next morning, before the sun was fully up, he was already on his way back to the Creed family estate. Back to the house that was less of a home and more of a monument to control. His father, Gregory Creed, was out of town, something Julian was thankful for. He didn't want questions. He wanted time. Alone. He headed straight to the library. It was quiet, cold like it always was, full of untouched books and drawers filled with files no one looked at anymore. Or at least, no one was supposed to. But Julian had grown up here. He knew where things were buried. In the back, behind a cabinet labeled Legacy Holdings, he found it. A locked drawer. The kind his father had said was just old real estate records. It wasn't hard to pick. He'd done it as a teenager, more than once, curious about the man who never seemed to tell him the whole story. This time, what he found wasn't just boring property deeds. It was worse. Inside was a folder stamped Project Aurora Confidential. Pages and pages of legal documents. Land transfers. Maps. One document, yellowed and slightly smudged, made his stomach turn. It was a death certificate. Name, Angela Johnson. Date of death, 20 years ago. Cause, unknown illness. Signature at the bottom, Dr. L. Havers. Julian didn't recognize the name, but he recognized the seal. It was fake. A copy of the same notary symbol used on other real files his father had forged years ago when pushing through zoning loopholes. But this wasn't just a zoning issue. This was a person. Ray's mother. Julian's hands shook as he read the next few pages. There was a land deed transfer, signed just days after the supposed death. The signature line on the seller's side was blank, but somehow the transaction was filed and finalized. There were no witnesses, no ID verification, just stamps, manufactured paper trails. He closed the folder and backed away like it might burn him. Meanwhile, Ray was back at the shop, staring at a dusty cardboard box she hadn't touched in years. It had her mother's handwriting on it. "Keep safe," the label read. Ray sat on the floor of the garage office and opened it slowly. Inside were papers, notebooks, newspaper clippings, and at the bottom, a manila envelope. She unfolded the contents and saw copies of letters. One from Angela, addressed to a lawyer named Vance Colby, pleading for help against an aggressive buyout from Cree Development. Another from the county land office, rejecting her claim of ownership because the land had already been transferred. There were notes scribbled in the margins. Names, phone numbers. One in particular stood out, Malcolm's contact at Waterboard. Ray had never paid attention to that line. Now it made her pause. She ran to the back of the shop. "Uncle Malcolm," she called out. "You remember when Mom disappeared? Did she ever talk about land issues?" Malcolm was under a truck, wiping his hands on his jeans. He looked tired. "Yeah," he said after a moment. She said the Creeds were pressuring her. Wanted the land. She was worried. Ray sat down next to him. "You never said anything." Malcolm looked away. "She told me not to. Said it was safer. That if anything happened to her, I should protect you. Not dig." Ray didn't respond. She felt something tight coil in her chest. "She didn't die," she said. "I mean, I don't think she did. There's no proof. Just a fake paper. Julian found it." Malcolm looked at her. "You sure?" Ray nodded. "And the land, it was stolen. We have proof now." That night, they met again, this time not as old friends or kids with memories, but as two people suddenly caught in something bigger than both of them. Julian sat on the front steps of Hope Garage, folder on his lap. Ray handed him her mother's envelope. They went through the documents together, page by page. Dates matched. Details overlapped. The picture started forming, clearer than either of them wanted. Gregory Creed hadn't just stolen land. He had erased a woman, fabricated a death, disappeared a mother, and called it business. Julian leaned back against the wall, the sky turning dark above them. "This wasn't just about expansion," he said. "It was about water rights. This valley sits on the largest natural aquifer in the county. You control that, you control everything." Ray nodded slowly. "So he got rid of my mom to get to the land. But why fake her death? Why not just buy it?" Julian shook his head. "Because she wouldn't sell. So he made it disappear. And her with it." Ray rubbed her face with both hands. "All these years, I thought she left me. Thought maybe she got tired. Couldn't do it anymore. But she fought. She fought until someone shut her down." Julian didn't know how to respond. Every word he said felt too small, too late. "We need to go public," Ray said quietly. "Take this to the media. Tell everyone what he did." Julian hesitated. "It won't be that easy." My father has connections. Lawyers. Politicians. You think they'll listen to you over him? Ray looked him in the eye. Then don't make them listen to me. Make them listen to you. That hit him hard. Because she was right. He had the platform. The spotlight. And if he chose to use it, he could do more than apologize. He could expose everything. Julian looked at the folder again, then at Ray. I'm in, he said. All the way. The wind picked up around them, carrying dust and silence. But the weight in Julian's chest felt different now. He wasn't just chasing a forgotten promise anymore. He was uncovering the cost of becoming the man his father always wanted him to be. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't want to be that man anymore. The square was almost empty when Julian arrived. It was just after 9, but the night felt deeper, quieter. The fountain in the center trickled softly, and the lamplight cast long shadows over the benches and bricks. Ray was already there, sitting under the same tree they used to hide beneath as kids. She didn't stand when she saw him, just looked at him like she'd been waiting years instead of hours. Julian walked over and sat beside her without a word. For a while, neither of them spoke. It was like both needed the silence more than explanations. Finally, Ray broke it. You remember this place? Julian nodded. I do now. You used to bring stale bread and try to feed birds that never came. Ray gave a quiet, almost sad laugh. They came once. You scared them away with that loud laugh of yours. Julian smiled, but it faded quickly. You said you had something to tell me. Ray looked straight ahead. My mom didn't leave me because she wanted to. She left because she had to. Gregory Creed gave her a choice: disappear or lose everything. He told her she was unstable, unfit, that he'd make sure no one believed her if she fought back. He showed up at our house the week before she vanished. I didn't understand it then. I just remember her hugging me tighter that night than ever before. The next morning, she was gone. Julian felt something cold settle in his chest. He threatened her? Ray nodded. She tried to fight it, went to a lawyer, but somehow he knew. The night she left behind a note. Just 3 lines. Don't look for me. Stay safe. I love you. I thought she killed herself. Everyone did. But now I know better. Julian reached into his coat pocket and handed her a photograph. Ray took it and stared at it in disbelief. It was a blurry image, security cam footage, of a woman standing behind a high metal fence, wearing a hospital gown. The image was dated 3 years ago. Ray's hand trembled. Where did you get this? I found it in a locked folder marked Legacy Risk Patients on my father's private server, Julian said quietly. Her name was coded, but the photo file wasn't. There were 2 more just like it. The facility belongs to one of our shell corporations. Upstate. Off-grid. Restricted access. Ray stared at the picture like it might dissolve. She's alive. Yes, Julian said. And I think she's still there. Ray stood up, pacing, tried to control her breathing. I'm going to the ceremony tomorrow. The Creed expansion project. He's supposed to give a speech, show off the land he developed. I'm going to expose everything. In front of the media, the board, his investors. I want them to hear it from me. Not some court document. Not an anonymous tip. Julian nodded slowly. Then let's make it count. I'll get you on stage. I have access. Security credentials. We'll do it your way, but we'll do it smart. Ray looked at him, eyes sharp now. You really ready to turn on him? That's your father. Julian didn't hesitate. He stopped being my father the day I found out what he did to you. To her. To everyone. I don't care about the last name. I care about making this right. They talked through the night, mapping every detail. Julian had the layout of the event, knew where the cameras would be, which reporters were pre-approved, which microphone fed directly to the live stream. Ray had the story, the papers, the letters. Everything to prove her mother's disappearance wasn't some tragic loss, but a calculated erasure. By dawn, the plan was set. They stood at the edge of the square, the sun barely peeking over the rooftops. Ray looked at him and said quietly, if this blows up, we'll both lose everything. Julian nodded. Then we'll build something better with what's left. She stared at him a moment longer, then walked off toward her truck without saying goodbye. Julian watched her go, and for the first time in years, he felt like he was finally walking toward something real. What he didn't tell Ray was that there was one more folder, one she hadn't seen. Inside, it wasn't just facility records. There was a name, Angela Johnson, tied to a medical holding file. It wasn't just a hospital. It was a private psychiatric facility owned by a subsidiary of Creed Holdings, listed as secured for asset leverage. There were notes, medication schedules, denied visitors, an emergency contact listed as Ernesto Creed, which made no sense until Julian remembered that Ernesto was Gregory's middle name. The code was clear. His father hadn't just buried Ray's mother. He had kept her. Somewhere deep in the machine he'd built, Angela Johnson was still alive. Held, not helped. Forgotten by everyone, except her daughter. Julian stared at the file again, then back at the meeting agenda for the next night. The groundbreaking ceremony had been moved up, possibly because Gregory suspected a leak. Only a few insiders knew about the change. Julian made a decision. He picked up the burner phone Ray had given him and texted, "Meet me tonight. Same place. Come alone." When Ray showed up, Julian handed her a new ID badge and a tablet with the updated event plan. Then he told her everything. About the locked ward. About the file. About Angela still being held. Ray didn't say a word for a long time. Then finally, through a clenched jaw, she whispered, "We get her out. First, then we go public." Julian nodded. "I already made the call. She'll be moved tomorrow morning. If we move now, there's still time." Ray looked at the photo again, this time with something fierce behind her eyes. "I'm not leaving without her. Not again." The plan shifted. What started as revenge had become a rescue mission. By the time they left the square that night, they weren't just two kids trying to make sense of the past. They were two adults walking into a fire, holding on to one small hope. That truth, even buried this long, could still mean something. The Creed expansion event was the kind of polished spectacle Julian had grown up around. Bright lights, pressed suits, champagne flutes held by gloved servers, and music that said power without having to say a word. The main stage stood tall in the middle of the property, once a green valley, now a flattened construction zone filled with banners and branded scaffolding. Gregory Creed stood at the podium, gray suit flawless, smile tight, voice practiced. "Today we break ground not just on a new development, but on a new future. A future where innovation meets integrity." Julian stood offstage, pretending to nod along, his hands shoved deep into his pockets to hide the tension in his fingers. Ray was in the crowd, hair pulled back, wearing a plain black jacket and jeans. She looked out of place deliberately, but she wasn't nervous. Her grip on the file in her hand was steady. Her jaw was set. Julian glanced down at his watch. 5 minutes until the scheduled media Q&A. 2 minutes until Ray would walk forward and blow the whole thing open. He looked out over the crowd, reporters, investors, city council reps, a few national outlets. All of them waiting for the next Creed soundbite. He took a deep breath, then stepped down from the side stairs and slipped quietly into the media section. Ray met his eye once, gave a small nod, and then stepped forward. At first, nobody noticed her. The spotlight was still on Gregory, who had just gestured to a ceremonial shovel as the photographers moved in. Then her voice cut through the noise. "Before you plant that shovel in stolen ground, I've got something to say." Everything stopped. The murmur started immediately. Cameras turned. Someone gasped. Gregory looked up, visibly thrown off for the first time in years. "Excuse me," he barked, stepping forward. Ray didn't flinch. "You said this land represents a new future, but it's built on a lie, on a family you destroyed, on a woman you erased. My mother didn't die. You faked her death. You took her land, and you kept her locked away for 20 years. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Julian stepped forward next to Ray, microphone in hand. "She's telling the truth," he said, "and I've seen the files. They're real. The death certificate was forged. The land transfer was illegal. The facility where Angela Johnson was held belongs to Creed Holdings." The room exploded into voices, shouting, disbelief, flashes from cameras firing like lightning. Gregory tried to step forward, furious, but security instinctively blocked the stage to keep things contained. He pointed at Ray, face twisted with rage. "You have no idea what you're talking about. You think you can walk in here and make accusations?" Ray raised the envelope in her hand. These are letters my mom wrote before she disappeared. Legal records, property files, all with your signature, Gregory. All of them tracing back to you. Julian added, and we're not the only ones who know. Copies have already been sent to state investigators. This isn't just about a family secret anymore. It's fraud. It's unlawful confinement. It's everything this company pretends not to be.